Whether you're building tables or shelves or any other kind of woodworking, stabilizing cracks is something you're going to have to do at some point, and butterfly keys are a great way to do it, but they can be tricky to make.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be going over my method for making butterfly keys or bow ties or Dutchman keys at the table saw. A lot of people use a bandsaw for this, and I don't have a bandsaw, so I came up with a good and safe way to make them at the table saw. So I'm going to share that here. I've got some floating shelves, and one of them has a really big crack that we got to stabilize. So we'll make a couple for that, and I'll show you how to do it. So I made these red oak floating shelves a few weeks ago, and I waited to sand and finish them because I knew I needed to stabilize this crack. So if I continue to let this go, this might get into the end grain and really kind of split the board. So what we're going to do is add a couple butterfly keys. I've got some yellow art here, and so let's go over to the table saw and show how we cut these out.
So I start off by just laying out where the butterfly keys are going to go. It's really an aesthetic choice at this point. As long as you have 2 or 3, it's going to be plenty strong. So I'm using yellow heart because it contrasts really nicely with any species, and I just think it's a really pretty wood. I start off by just cutting it down to the approximate sizes at the crosscut sled, and then we can move on to further layout. So now that I've got them into chunkier pieces, I can go ahead and resaw them at the table saw, and I'm just using some shop-made push sticks here. These are made of scrap wood and some self-adhesive back cork. I'm going to show how to make these in a short video in the future, so stay tuned for that. They work really well and they're really cheap to make, but I just cut these down and then we can bring them back and work on the main cuts.
Okay, so we just got those ripped down to thickness, so now I've got a bunch of the same length blanks here. What I'm going to do is just throw in the crosscut sled and start cutting them to random lengths because it's actually better for them to look kind of random and natural. I think it just makes them look a little better than if they're all uniform and symmetric. So yeah, I'm just going to throw these on and cut them to some random lengths, and then we'll go ahead and cut the angled cuts.
A lot of this is going to be by feel and look here, and that's why I like doing it this way. When you use just a router template jig or something like that, pre-made ones to do Dutchman keys, they end up really looking just kind of robotic or maybe machine made. And so if you do it like this, they're really organic and give a nice look.
Okay, so to make the angled cuts, I'm actually going to use a dedicated crosscut sled here that I have made specifically for mitered cuts at the table saw. So you can see here we've got 2 different curves of the blade. And on the front, I've got labeled 79.4. That's the same as an 8:1 dovetail ratio, and that's the angle I like to use for these Dutchman joints or these butterfly keys. So I'm going to go ahead and change the blade to 79.4, and we'll proceed with taking the angled cuts. Okay, so you can see on mine, because I actually made a larger angle cut on this sled at some point, I've got this big gap between where the floor ends here, where the zero clearance part ends, and where the kerf is. And if I'm doing these small pieces, there's no reference area. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and tack on a quick sacrificial bottom, and then we back are having full support here of our blank. So I'll just nail this in and we'll get on to cutting. Okay, so to set up the cut, first thing we're going to do is set the blade height. So what I'm going to do is bring the blank over here, and I'm going to set the blade height to just under halfway in terms of height of this blank. So I'll put that there, and I'll go ahead and raise the blade. And you don't have to be dead on, you just want to be close to half, you don't want to go past half. So just get it close, and then we'll move on to setting the fence. Here I put a little reference line at the halfway point. That just helps me set the blade height because, again, we want to be just below half, we don't want to be past half. Next thing we can do is just set up the fence here. So I've got a stop block, and what I'm going to do is just get it set up so that it's just starting to cut into the corner of the blank here. And so, you know, and this will, you can change this distance based on the shape you want to get. You can kind of play with this as you do it, but I found that this is a perfect distance, so I'll go ahead and keep it there. And next what I'm going to do is work on the clamp. Because the face of the clamp, because this blank is small, and the face of the clamp is going to be coming right here, we of course, especially on a saw stop, we want to make sure we don't have the clamp interfering with the blade. So what I've actually done is using a Sharpie is I've extended the kerf here all the way up to the top, and I've done that on the back side as well, so that as I put on the clamp, I can make sure that it's completely clearing this kerf all the way up. So I'll go ahead and clamp the piece down, and we're going to make our first 2 cuts. Okay, so you can see I've got the clamp in place there, and I've made sure that this entire edge you can see is offset from that kerf line. If you envision your eye going from the bottom of the kerf up to the top, we can totally clear it there, and we're going to check on the back side as well. So here on the back side of the setup, again, you can see the clamp is completely clearing this kerf, so we know that our blade's not going to interfere with the clamp at all, so we're good to make our cut. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that's snug and make the cuts.
So you can see the setup is a bit finicky here, but as you do it more, it becomes pretty easy. You just want to double check that the blade's going to clear the stop block and the clamp and everything else. Once you get that all figured out, and I've done it a few times, it's really consistent and a really nice way to make these on the table saw.
Okay, so you can see how it looks here after the first two cuts. We've got super sharp, crisp edges. Again, I take those cuts slow on the table saw. There's no need to rush this. You're making a pretty steep, large surface area cut. So just go slow, make sure the clamp's on. But you can see this looks perfect. So now we're just gonna flip it upside down, reclamp it. Most likely this little piece will get cut off or kind of caught and flung during this next cut. But that's why we're clamping it and not having our hands anywhere near. We can let this little piece get chewed off and not have to worry about it. So we'll go ahead and clamp this in and make the final two cuts.
I'm showing this cut in real time to show you that even though it looks fragile, and it is kind of fragile, it's really straightforward. And again, as long as you take it slow and everything clamped in place, it's perfectly safe. It's no different from making a small cut on just a normal crosscut sled. It's the same concept here, and if that piece does get chewed up by the blade, that's why we have the clamp instead of our hands there, and so you're stayed clear of the blade and it's totally safe.
If you're doing this for the first time and you're nervous at all about that off cut flying off during the cut, what we can do here is actually set the blade just slightly lower than the halfway point. So you can see I've got the halfway point scribed there, and I've got the blade set just a little bit below that. And then what that's going to do is keep that off cut on, and then we'll come off at the end with a chisel and just take it off. So we're going to leave it a little lower and do the same thing. Okay, just to see what was going on here, so you can see because I wanted the fence even a little bit closer to the blade, of course I didn't want the metal fence hitting the saw stop, so I just used a sacrificial piece of wood here as the stop block, and so I can remove that. And if you look here, because we kept that blade just slightly below the halfway line, we actually have this little nub still on there. You can see that was a pretty precision cut there. You can see how close those are. But now what we can do is bring these over to the bench and snap these off and just take off that remaining little nub with a chisel, and we'll be left with another really nice butterfly key. So I'm just going to throw this in the vise here, and just using a nice sharp chisel, I'm just going to take off this last little bit. So I'm going to come in from both sides. And as I come in from the second side here, again, I'm just referencing the flat of the chisel on the angle there, and boom, that little nub's gone.
You'll see in this angle here that you don't get an absolute perfect seam here from removing it with the chisel. You'll get that little bit of line, but you'll probably get that using any method you use to cut these, but it'll be hidden in the final product.
Just like that, you've got yourself a really nice assortment of butterfly keys ready for whatever project you're working on. You can see with this method, you can get really thin ones, some thicker ones, shorter ones, taller ones, and I think it works really well. Again, you just want to be careful with how, and make sure you clamp it really well, but it's totally safe if done right. So yeah, we're going to go on and get these in the floating shells and get these put in. So just a tip when you're lining up the placement of these butterfly keys, if you're going to use CA glue with tape on each side, which is the way I do it to mark out where these keys go, it can be tricky to see where the crack is, and of course we want the apex of these angles to lie right on the center of the crack. So a good way to get around that is just take something like a carpenter's pencil and rub across here, and you'll see the outline of where that crack is, and then you can come in and place your butterfly key right on center.
That wraps up my technique for making these butterfly keys at the table saw. Again, I don't have a bandsaw, so this is the only method I have for making them, but I think I perfected it so that I get really accurate and safe results, and I've made dozens and dozens and dozens of these butterfly keys and never had an issue. So if you follow the way I've done it here, you should have no issues at all and enjoy making them and making beautiful pieces with them. So I'm going to finish off this shelf, and thanks for watching. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this coming soon. Finish out the video, and we'll see you soon.